Most of the civil rights movements were active in the 1960s, and they made positive results such as the Civil Rights Act in 1964, the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and the African American Civil Rights Act. These were landmarks in American legislation. They were the first official laws which forbid the discrimination against ethnic, religious minorities, and women. The trigger of these movements was John F. Kennedy's speech. He proposed the Civil Rights Act through his speech called the Civil Rights Address on June 11th in 1963. Not only John F. Kennedy, but also Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, who were the leaders of African American civil rights movements, offered significant help to legislate for the Civil Rights Act. However, while people remember several population uprisings of the civil rights movements in the 1960s, they often overlook one of the important riots, the Stonewall Uprising. The Stonewall Uprising was the most significant turning point in LGBTQ history. It changed an invisible problem to a visible issue and forced people to start treating the sexual minorities' rights as the civil rights. Stonewall riots are the first gay movement, which were started in 1969. The first trigger event was the Stonewall Uprising, and the uprising happened during the conflict between the police and the gays in the Stonewall Inn, so the riots named Stonewall Riots.
It just happened. It didn't matter if we were going to get our heads broken. It didn't matter if we were going to go in the hospital. Nothing mattered. It was like moth to a flame. We just could not stop it.
By that night, we had it. When the cops came here and they were going to go into that dive across the street, the only place we had where we could go. Run by the mafia, yeah, but we could play those Motown songs and hold on to each other.
We joined in the riot, taking the rocks from the park, bottles, anything we could find. We broke the windows. We saw the police. They turned the water hoses on us from inside. We took them back, turned them back into them. They turned the water off. They were putting people in a paddy wagon.
So this was a unique event. The Stonewall Riot sparked the gay liberation movement by the founding of the Gay Liberation Front and then the Gay Activists Alliance, which were gay rights organizations that were modeled on a New Left model. And that's what transformed the small homophile movement into a mass political movement, putting the movement for gay civil rights on the political map of America forever.
The Stonewall Inn was located on the Christopher Street, which is the oldest and longest street in Greenwich Village. The street began with the location of English Street Bookshop, the most influential bookstore in Manhattan. At the intersection of Christopher Street with Greenwich Avenue, there is a popular gathering place for the actors and writers of Provincetown Players, an association of some of the 20th century's most important talents in the theater, such as Jane O'Neill. Actually, the first name of Stonewall Inn was different. It had changed its name 3 times. The Stonewall Restaurant was the first name, and the next name was Booney Stonewall. And artists, intellectuals, and gay men and lesbians began to socialize more and more in tea rooms, since bars could no longer serve alcohol. The tea rooms were routinely raided by the police. However, the owner of the bar, presumably Booney, was alerting the new memorial to send a coded message to lesbians that they would be welcome there. It became the most notorious tea rooms in the New York City. The final name was changed again to the Stonewall Inn Restaurant in 1960s. It was former Stonewall Inn Restaurant that in 1967, having sat vacant for some time after the fire got it, metamorphosed onto the gay club in Stonewall Inn. Before it changed to the Stonewall Inn Restaurant, it was closed for a while because of a fire in mid-1960s. However, Tony Lauria converted the space into the gay bar within a minimal effort. The first Stonewall Uprising happened in the Stonewall Inn in 1969. The Stonewall Uprising looks like a movement which occurred accidentally and instantly, but it is not. For a long time, homosexuals were harassed, hated, and isolated by heterosexuals because of their sexual orientation. Homosexual relationship was forbidden by the law. In the New York City, if a person wore unmatched clothes with his or her physical sexuality, the person was arrested according to subsection 4 of section 240.35 of the New York Penal Code, because that person masked by unusual and unnatural attire or facial alteration. Most of homosexuals had extreme negative perspective to homosexuality. They thought the homosexual is an inveterate seducer of the youth of both sexes and is not content with being degenerate himself. They also insisted homosexuals descend through perversions to other forms of depravity such as drug addiction, burglary, sadism, and even murder. They believed once a man assumes the role of homosexual, he throws off all moral restraints. Homosexuality was treated as a sin and people did not know about the existence of gays and lesbians. Gay and lesbian were very unfamiliar words to people, even including homosexuals. Lisa Ben, who is a lesbian, recalled her youth and she said, "I knew how I felt, but I didn't know how to go about finding someone else who was like me. And there was just no way to find out in those days." Gays did not have any safe places to stand, and they could not claim equal rights to heterosexuals. In this repressed situation, gays found a bar which was only for them. It was Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Inn became the biggest gay club in New York City, and homosexuals could enjoy their lives in that place. They can kiss, hug, and dance with the same sex without worrying. However, on June 28, in 1969, the police surrounded the Stonewall Inn, and the patrons of Stonewall Inn stood in front of the door to take care of their friends in this serious atmosphere. The raid was started at 1 a.m., and the cops tried to arrest people who were staying in the bar, but gay men and lesbians swore to the police officers, punched them, and called their friends. The lesbians and the police fought in the bar, and one lesbian shouted for help. Then, other homosexuals who stood outside of the bar involved that fight. In the middle of the night, gays chanted through the bottles and smashed the windows with their anger and wildness. Throughout the day, the smashed windows of the Stonewall Inn were boarded and painted black. The news about the uprising spread rapidly through New York's gay grapevine. People who heard this insurrection were excited and they came to the Stonewall Inn to be a part of the riots, including heterosexuals. The writer of the Stonewall riots, David Carter, said, "The Stonewall Inn was the initial focal point for the gathering of mostly gay men along with a few lesbians and a sprinkling of straight supporters. When people gathered in front of the Stonewall Inn, numerous slogans appeared on the Stonewall Inn's boarded-up windows. The Stonewall riots were the first step to change an invisible problem, homosexuality, to a visible issue. People started agreeing with the homophile movement. Michael Brown decided to create an action committee to make more systematical gay society. On July 9th, they named their group as Gay Liberation Front, GLF, and through several meetings, they made specific plans for the homophile movements. The Stonewall riots gave the significant opportunity to organize gay society. After the 1969 Stonewall riots, the gay liberation movement was going to liberate sexuality and let it to be socially viewed as a freestanding good, while that person has long since been sorely disappointed. In June 2003, there was an event which shows that homosexuality was not an invisible issue anymore. It was Lawrence versus Texas decision court case. Lawrence and Garner, who were arrested because they sexed in a car in 1989, tried to justify the homosexual sex. Lawrence insisted that the sodomy law in Texas invades the privacy of homosexuals. The United States Supreme Court made homosexual activity legal in every U.S. state. It was completely opposite decision with the 1986 case Bowers versus Hardwick. The US government could not treat the LGBTQ community as invisible people anymore. Homosexuality started being treated as a visible issue, but still people did not consider the homophile movement as same as civil rights movement. Richard D. Moore, the author of The Long Arc of Justice, said, "Current federal civil rights law bars private sector discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodation on the basis of race, national origin, ethnicity, gender, religion, age, and disability, but not sexual orientation." However, the continuous gay movement slowly made people recognize the homophile movement as the civil rights movement. The evidence of changing of people's perspective is the ending of DADT policy. DADT law is don't ask, don't tell policy, and it's saying lesbian and gay soldiers should not tell their sexual orientation in the military. In October 2009, the president signed into law a bill that he strongly supported and that was inclusive of LGBT victims. Then, in December 2010, he explains why repeal of DADT was such an important priority to him. He said, ending DADT will strengthen our national security and uphold the ideals that our fighting men and women risk their lives to defend. No longer will our country be denied the service of thousands of patriotic Americans who were forced to leave the military, regardless of their skills, no matter their bravery or their zeal, no matter their years of exemplary performance, because they happen to be gay. No longer will tens of thousands of Americans in uniform be asked to live a lie or look over their shoulder in order to serve the country that they love. The 2011 election was the first election which focused on the LGBT community. It is evidence which shows the homophile movement started being considered as one of civil rights. It takes over 50 years to be the visible people from the invisible people and be treated as one of the civil rights movements. The Stonewall riots can be considered as just sexual minorities violent riots. However, it is the biggest turning point in the gay history because the true legacy of the Stonewall riots is the ongoing struggle for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender equality.